Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of ESPN FC Live, our weekly live stream show here on YouTube. We're on 3 times a week in the day, just before we get the boys on for ESPN FC at night. I'm Alexis Nunes alongside Janusz, Michallik, and James Ollie is joining us all the way from Stamford Bridge. That's exactly where we are going to start today because we were treated to the Merseyside derby earlier on. And this evening, we got a London derby. We had Arsenal from up north going to Chelsea in the west, and it was looking, James, like it was going to be definitely Chelsea's best performance that we've seen so far and a big result to them. But Arsenal fought back from 2 goals down to get at least a point at Stamford Bridge. How much of a chance was this blown for Chelsea?
Yeah, I think that's the story, really. I thought they were brilliant, really, in the first half. Probably for the first hour or so, this was certainly the best performance under Pochettino and one of the best performances since the Todd Bowley Clear Lake takeover. I think that there will be a huge amount of regret that they weren't able to see it through. If you think about even at 2-0 and late in the game, Nicholas Jackson came on having a couple of chances to score a third, which you would have thought would have killed it off. They had a good measure of control, and Arsenal, where we sit here in the press box, can't see it from this angle, but we're only about 10, 15, probably say 10 rows from the dugout. And Mikel Arteta is normally quite animated on the touchline anyway, but from minute one today, he was quite angry at his own team's performance. You could tell he was frustrated with how they were giving the ball away. They just did not look at it at all. And I think a big part of that was that Pochettino surprised Arsenal with the setup, slightly shifting things tactically, playing Cole Palmer as a false nine, snuffing out Odegaard in central areas as Arsenal tried to build play through the midfield. Cucurella doing a fantastic job, and Bukayo Saka on a 1v1 on that left-hand side. And for a long time, it really looked as though they had Arsenal where they wanted them. The fact that they've not been able to see it out will be a huge source of frustration, because it's these kind of results that can be real building blocks for a young team thrown together like this, and a manager who obviously only has been in the role for a couple of months.
Well, once again, there were some decisions, of course, that we're going to talk about in a bit, whether a certain handball was a handball or not these days. We'll talk about that soon. But Janusz, as James was saying, Chelsea definitely putting forward what was their best performance so far under Mauricio Pochettino. And Arsenal, we can definitely say, were far from their best, but they are still a strong team. Even though I know you have Liverpool as the main contenders to push City title, but many still believe Arsenal are in it with a good shout too. So was this a fair result?
Well, fair. What's fair, right? Arsenal showed something that over probably a decade, they haven't, right? We've talked about Arsenal being soft. We've talked about Arsenal not having the spine. We've talked about Arsenal not having a character. Just a few years back, right? This is a game that Arsenal never comes back from. And, it's a little bit of luck, you have to say. And I don't want to single people out, but Robert Sanchez gave them life. He absolutely gave them life. That one goal brought him back, even on the second one. And, that's probably not for the show, but I still, part of me thinks that ball by Saka, he always knew where it was going. He could have helped Gusto, even though he fell asleep there after having a tremendous game at right back. But this tells me a lot about both teams, both positive. Unfortunately, the supporters and their managers will probably not feel about it differently, because Chelsea definitely gave points away. I think James is absolutely right. The shape without the ball of Chelsea was superb. The 4-4-2 created massive problems for them, because remember, I thought that Arteta outcoached Pep in a way that he forced them inside and he won the battle in there, right? And I always felt like, why is Pep and Manchester City not attacking them when they don't have Saka and Martinelli? Here, Martinelli and Saka were both back, but I think that 4-4-2 without the ball allowed the likes of Mudryk and Sterling without the ball to help out Gusto and Cucurella, and that's why Saka and Martinelli were not existent until, of course, Saka delivered that good cross. So James is quite right. I think this was a Poch's team. So he's going to be happy with that he saw the energy. The pressing was good. Remember early in the first 2 or 3 minutes, issues with Declan Rice with bad passes and Odegaard. They were in massive trouble. So 2 points lost for Pochettino and Chelsea, because the building blocks of that win would have gone a long way. But for Arteta, my goodness, great escape. But how important is that when you're looking for that progress? I mean, I'm sure he's going to go back to this game over and over and over again because those are important points.
Well, James, one of the things that I think we're probably going to go over and over again a little bit once again has to do with the VAR decision. Of course, Chelsea took the lead thanks to Cole Palmer converting from the penalty spot. A handball was given on William Saliba, and at halftime, pretty much everyone was debating whether it was deliberate because it looked like he was jumping, and how else do you propel yourself up but to use your hands to balance yourself? From you there at Stamford Bridge, what's all the talk been like in the press box?
Well, under the current interpretations of the rules, it's a penalty, but the rules are ridiculous. What we're trying to do here is apply a binary set of principles to what is a handball and what isn't, because this desperate search for consistency has removed the referee's ability to use his own judgment. And so we're getting these situations where instead of allowing a referee to decide, applying common sense, he's having to apply this ludicrous, arbitrary line that's been drawn, which is an unnatural position. Now, if you look at the still, of when Mudrik's header hits Saliba, it looks unnatural because Saliba's arm's out, almost a right angle to his body. And if you look at that still, and if the referee is told to go to the touchline, and there's particularly when you're talking about giving a potentially penalty for the home team, you're looking at that still, and clearly you've been told you might need to look at this again. VAR is in his ear saying you might need to look at this again. How can you give any other decision than a penalty? Yeah. But if he was actually allowed to look at the situation in real time and say, do you know what, this is an on-field call you need to make. Actually, how do you jump without your arms coming away from your body in one way or another, one. And secondly, the distance between Mudryk and Saliba at the time of which Mudryk actually makes that header. There's no conscious decision to try and handle the ball there. But under the letter of the law, in this current interpretation, it's a penalty. And that's where the problem lies. And that's where I have a lot of sympathy for the on-field referee in this situation, because what is he supposed to do? He's probably standing there thinking, really, I know this is a bit of a silly decision, but because of the way we're trying to eliminate any inconsistency from the game, it's creating an inconsistency in a different way, if you see what I mean.
Janusz, as a former player yourself, what do you make of what James says? Because it's true with all of these decisions that lack of consistency. We don't know it's a penalty or not anymore.
It's true, but part of me, and I said the same things as James said, and I thought about it, and as a player, but I kind of, at the end, I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think it's a penalty because at the end of the day, what do we give the penalty for? Other than somebody stopping the ball purposely on the line, what would you give it for? So think about this, because Mudryk is in an identical position as he is. It's just, he gets there first. And, at some stage, if handball is going to be pretty much a penalty, because, it's one of those situations where he gets there first, he heads the ball, and the ball is being stopped from going on goal. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a goal or not, if that effort was strong enough or not, but it doesn't matter. So he does stop it from there. And
Janusz, surely it's got to be conscious. Surely there's got to be some
but there's the consciousness. Yeah, but the conscious decision's out the window. It's not right. I mean, that's never been, for how many years now that.
If it's a deliberate handball or not, we've taken that out of the equation. If you go back to the old interpretation of whether that is a deliberate handball or not, and
there is never a deliberate situation, never ever, unless you on the line and you stop the goal. It was
defenders putting their arms out to stop a cross.
Well, but I mean, you have to do it.
We've also seen when the balls come in high from a corner and a defender's jump like this.
But it's hardly deliberate. Nobody is stopping it unless you have a brain fart. My point is that because we have to decide, and that arm is stopping the header, you have to get there first. Look at it. I mean, Mudryk is in an identical situation. Same story, identical. Going for a header with the arm out, just like Saliba. Identical. He gets there first. And at some stage, you have to say to yourself, if you don't give it for that, no matter how ridiculous you think that is, what do you give a handball for? Of course, as a player, I would have said the same thing. But we have to make those decisions. Forget VAR, forget everything else. We have to give in the laws of the game. I mean, if this was being played, you and I played five-a-side somewhere in London. I mean, surely immediately you say it's a handball, and that's what happens. That's what we are as fans, and you have to make that decision. So I don't say this lightly. I know I'm going to probably get some hate, and there's plenty of normally my initial reaction was that, yeah, I mean, he can't be. Of course, I know he didn't mean it. Of course, it's by seconds, but you make a conscious decision to go for a head ball. You're fighting for that ball with Mudryk. You get their second best, where Mudryk, I'm telling you, look at it, is an identical situation. Head, his arm is out. And, you stop that from going on goal. So at some stage, if you don't give it, imagine, I'll put it differently. Imagine if Mudryk, it hits his arm, drops, and he puts it away. What would you say?
Well, I reject the premise of the question. No, well, listen, I reject the premise of the question because I don't think that it's an identical situation. What for once, Mudryk is running one way and Saliba's running the other. So Saliba's naturally going to have to turn his body to defend. Mudryk's attacking the ball. They're not the same motions. So it's not the same.
You may have to look at that. Look, I know that in the mind of everybody, I hope actually I win this fight. I know I probably won't, but
you're not going to get any hate from me, Janusz.
They're both going for that ball. But I mean, that arm is there, and I get it that in the proximity and all of that. But in my opinion, that header, Mudryk gets there first, and that's significant. I don't care if he's late or not. It's significant. Just like tackles, sometimes you go for a tackle and you're 100% sure you're going to win it. You get there late and you get penalized with either a penalty or a red card very often, right? And in this case, he gets there second and he stops that ball from going on goal. I mean, if we don't give it for that, what do we give it for? And you can say the proximity, but that cross, by the way, it takes a while to get there. And there are risks in the game. So that's why I don't have a big issue. Now, by the way, I could be tweaked like you are because I know deep down if I were in that position, I go with you on that one. But we're not in that position. We have to look at it. There is VAR. Yes, we get to look at it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. But for as long as that situation's there, for as long as replay's there and VAR is there, at some stage you have to call something a handball.
Well, at least VAR's ended the debate about penalties and handball and all of that.
So, exactly. I'm pretty sure we're going to be debating this more, but we're definitely going to talk about some more stuff that stood out. Chelsea, James, were pretty much in control of this game until that Sanchez clearance era. And he wasn't the only goalkeeper today that looked a bit rocky there. Again, the questions around Raya, especially with a certain Aaron Ramsdale, kind of sat down watching. Just your thoughts on the goalkeeping, and will Mikel Arteta kind of scratch his head after this?
No, I mean, what Raya's doing is exactly what Mikel Arteta wants. He spoke about this quite well, actually, after the Man City game, that, in the way that they are trying to build out from the back, he wants him to have more touches, to take risks, to invite the press onto him, if you like, because he feels that it can then get Arsenal's attacking players on the ball in space in earlier positions earlier in the move. Look, I mean, the Arsenal fans got quite nervy about it during the City game, and clearly something he's going to have to learn to handle is away from home in these big matches. Crowds are going to get on his. If they're going to keep doing this, crowds are going to get on him. They are going to try and unsettle him. They are going to encourage, particularly when you've got, as Janusz quite rightly pointed out earlier, with the 4-4-2 without the ball, and they had Cole Palmer and Conor Gallagher leading the press forward, who both worked absolutely tirelessly without the ball today. Really, really good for Chelsea. And you've got players like that who are willing to go and close them down. You are inviting pressure. You are, creating risk at the back. And obviously there was that incident where Raya gave the ball away, and he recovered quite well.
Against Palmer,
against Palmer, that's right, yeah. So there could have been an absolute howler from him today. I mean, as it turns out, Sanchez was the one who made the mistake. I've seen a bit of chat about blaming Raya for the Mudryk goal. I don't see that at all. I think that's a Mudryk cross that he's hit. It's a freak that it's gone in. I don't think he meant it at all. I don't think you can blame the goalkeeper or his positioning for that at all. But as you quite rightly say, I mean, Aaron Ramsdale wasn't here today. His wife's just given birth to a baby boy. But every time David Raya makes a mistake, normally it's the camera cut to Ramsdale in the stands. And it is a decision that, is going to warrant greater scrutiny. The more that Raya looks uncomfortable and the more risks that he takes in playing out from the back.
Janusz, your thoughts on the goalkeeping?
Yeah, I think he's made up his mind. I mean, he's going to stick with the principle because that's the way he wants to play. It's a little bit like with Onana, right? I mean, although they don't have maybe a Ramsdale on the bench, but I think he's going to stick with him because of the way of playing, and deep down he knows that Ramsdale probably is never going to be as comfortable as Raya. However, if this continues, there's going to be natural pressure. There's going to be pressure from pundits. It's going to be not that Arteta will listen to us, but it piles on from the supporters and all that. And if the goalkeeper loses confidence every time he steps on the pitch from the Arsenal faithful, you look around and says, well, yeah, it's Ramsdale. It's not just any other young or 39-year-old reserve goalkeeper. So I think there's a limit to that. But I think if it's every so often, I think the risk is worth taking. It's like a high line. I remember speaking with Patrick Vieira, who had a high line, and he truly believes in that, just like Jurgen Klopp. And he says, look, I know before the game, it's built into it that we're going to give away 2, maybe sometimes even 3 breakaways. I'm willing to pay the price for that risk, because with every mistake, you kind of learn to think and play a little bit quicker. And so that kind of goes with a goalkeeper playing out of the back.
All right, so the 2 London clubs there share the points, but I suppose Arsenal might be slightly happy at the end of the night with that never say die attitude that Declan Rice recently spoke about in his post-match interview. But let's move on quickly now. James, just wanted to pick your brain on the devastating news that we found out earlier today that Sir Bobby Charlton, the absolute legend, has passed away at the age of 86. This is a name that we hold any fan of the game. He just transcends the game. He transcends generations. Like I said, we're all in different age groups, but we all grew up hearing about Sir Bobby Charlton. He's just held so highly for us, and he's almost like lore. I know that you have a really personal story with the big man, and just your thoughts on the absolute legacy that he's leaving behind.
Yeah, I think I've seen him described as the first gentleman of football, and I don't think there's much to disagree with that. Saddened and shocked to hear the news. Covered England for about 15 years, and he's been around the camps and St George's on occasion, and still is regarded as one of the greats of the game. Will always be regarded as one of the greats of the game, and still a hugely inspirational figure, I think, for even the modern day generation. My personal sort of story of him. When I was at university, I wrote my university dissertation on the 1966 World Cup, and I didn't have any connections to any of the players or anyone, but I sort of fired off a load of letters, as it was back then, and the odd email to some of the ex-players, to people at the FA at the time, asking a variety of questions. Basically, I sent as many questionnaires as I could out, asking every facet of the tournament, from how the team prepared to the organisational side of it, to the experience of the fans, all these sort of things. And the one reply I got was Sir Bobby Charlton. And I remember opening the letter, and it was handwritten responses to my questions. And I could not believe that the only reply I'd had was from England's then all-time record top goal scorer, the biggest legend in English football, had taken the time to reply to a 19, 20-year-old, as I was then, with no connection, no reason to do it beyond me just begging for help. And yet here was this absolute leviathan of football, willing to take the time to answer my questions. And I just think it says so much about the man and the legend and the personality and the character that he was.
Do you still have the letter?
I do. Yes, of course. I would never throw something like that out. It was something that it was 5 minutes, I'm sure 10 minutes of his time, but it meant the absolute world to me, and it meant my dissertation got me a good mark, and it really impressed my lecturers, and it took it from being me waffling on for 10,000 words to actually having some gravitas to it, and that's what he gave all of us, a bit of gravitas.
Yeah, I think that definitely is one of the best stories I've heard today from everyone sharing their moments and their favorite memories of the big man. James Ollie, thank you so much. I know you've still got plenty of work to do there at Stamford Bridge. We're going to let you go and wrap up.
Thank you.
All right, Janusz, let's just continue talking about Sir Bob, because like I said, just a man that transcends, countries, age groups, the game itself. Just your earliest memories when you started hearing about the big man, because obviously as someone who played the game, I'm sure you would have watched these old grainy videos of him and understand why he was considered as one of the greatest attackers of the game of all time.
I'm going to date myself. I was born in 1966. That's when England somehow won the World Cup. Back then. So I can't, I can't really talk about, his time as a player other than old videos, right? But I think, it got me thinking a little bit, because we often talk about legends. The first thing that comes to mind is a gentleman, right, on and off the pitch. Yeah. And it's funny when you talk about legends from a different era, because sometimes you don't really know what to say. Everything's been said already, but when you talk about that, it's good to reflect on how the game has changed since he was a player, but yet I suspect that Sir Bobby Charlton and his values have never changed, right? And it's refreshing in a way, because he has instilled some of those values to the generations of great players, right? Being in Manchester United, he's a legend, the Busby Babes and the Munich disaster. And, I heard on our telecast, Phil Neville was in the studio. And of course, he grew up in that system, talking about what he has done for him and an endless amount of great stars because the way he was. And those values are important, because we can talk about former legends, but they're not all the same. Yet I've always felt that just watching him in the stands at every Manchester United game and not hearing too much from him, but yet he was, always a presence to anybody. And, listen to James Olney, who was talking about the letter, which I didn't know, but it somehow doesn't surprise me. So I think you have to look at that, how the game has changed, yet he hasn't. And many players will have plenty of the stories that we've heard so far in the days to come.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's the overriding theme that we're getting, as many people who got to come across the big man have been saying that, some players are legends for what they do on the pitch. Others are legends for how they carry themselves off the pitch. And Sir Bobby Charlton definitely was one of the few that is a legend because of both what he did on the pitch and how he was off the pitch. Definitely not going to be forgotten anytime soon. Let's just get ready to wrap things up here on ESPN FC Live. But first, we have to talk about Manchester City up against Brighton. It was quite a lively game. We know that Brighton have had a bit of a downtime as well. Manchester City, too, avoiding a third consecutive Premier League defeat. It sounds weird saying that. We were wondering if Erling Haaland was going to, come back and break his drought by his standards, at least in the Premier League. And he did. He was on target today. City get the 2-1 win. Janusz, thoughts on the game?
Well, at the end of the day, you can still say that Manchester City aren't right. And we knew that, but look where they are still, right? And, this is not news. We've seen this movie before. And, towards the end of the season, they always find a way. But, there's always a stop to that. So on one hand, I continue to say that when they get it right, when the international breaks are over, when they recover Kevin De Bruyne when it matters in February or March, they're going to be ready, because Pep will eventually figure it out who's going to play and when. Right now, he's just rotating the breaks, as we've mentioned. I suspect he's not going to be very happy with Akanji today because of really silly yellow card. But then again, I think I look on the bench and I see Nathan Ake and I see Ruben Diaz there. So ultimately, he'll figure it out. But it does give an opportunity to the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool to perhaps stay as close, if not closer, as needed. As I've said, in February or March, if somebody's not 9 points ahead of Manchester City with even games, nobody has a chance. But I think, again, Brighton towards the end showed that they're very much capable. They caused some problems, but Manchester City is just good enough, deep enough to get these results. And this one was significant, of course, after the loss to Arsenal. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't pretty. It's not the Manchester City that we rave about after games, because I don't remember a game, to be quite honest, just yet from Pep Guardiola, Manchester City, where you'd say, this is it. They're still trying to figure out how to compensate not only for the loss of Kevin De Bruyne, but Ilkay Gundogan, and to a large degree, I continue to say that, to compensate for Riyad Mahrez, who I think was a very important player. The good news is this is finally Phil Foden that we've been looking for. We saw glimpses of that today. And Jeremy Doku, I don't know whose idea was to put James Milner, and I don't enjoy saying that because he's been such a great player, whose idea was to put him against Jeremy Doku. He's doing all the things right, just maybe that final moment. You saw him coming inside, couple of shots to the far post. He came all so close. Maybe some decisions at the end that weren't perfect, but Doku has been breath of fresh air because he's been really good and certainly putting Jack Grealish under pressure, which ultimately is a good thing for Pep Guardiola, that competition within, which is what wins Manchester City titles.
Yeah, well, like I said, last season, we were singing De Zerbi and Brighton's praises for the type and the brand of football that kind of passion that they brought back. I remember speaking to Alexis McAllister when he was still there, and he just talked about just the difference it has been in the team when De Zerbi came in. But one of the things that they not seem to be getting right, actually, I read that they have conceded more goals than any other team in the Premier League right now outside of the relegation zone. And we know that that's a zone that they're not trying to be in anytime soon, Janusz. So this defense seems to be costing them. I know it may go with the style that De Zerbi wants to play, but how does he put this right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be difficult. There's a ceiling. I mean, Brighton is always at or above their ceiling, and nothing's going to change that. Going forward, when you risk so much, there's going to be always an issue. And although obviously losing a McAllister and Caicedo, who protect the back four, is important, but also today, and hopefully not, I haven't checked yet because look, you had Solly March playing at left back. I mean, it's a mess going the other way because on the right-hand side, he's been superb, and that looked like a bad injury. And remember, he's coming off a long-term injury last season as well, so I hope everything's okay. But he's at left back, where, of course, Estupinian's been superb this season already. Tariq Lamptey, when he's deputized, he's been great, scoring goals as well. And as I just mentioned, you have James Milner playing at right back against the opposition like this. I think that answers the question. Now with Igor and Dunk, of course there are limitations, so I don't know if that's fixable, but again, those are different pressures. I mean, he's doing wonders at that club right now, and there's only so far a team can go like that, having to deal with Europe and Premier League. Forget Europe, even if they just have to deal with the Premier League, there's just not enough there to sustain this a great balance that will get Brighton to anything above where they are right now. So I wouldn't look into it. It almost doesn't matter really. I mean, they're doing great.
Well, someone we want to talk about a bit more on Manchester City, especially because weirdly this week there were some little transfer rumors saying that Real Madrid might be interested in him, and you could see why. Julian Alvarez once again on the mark right there, scoring goals left, right, and center. It seems. Just how impressed are you with how he is now at Manchester City, especially considering this is only his second season?
Left, right, and center is right. He gave himself an assist, right? I mean, one foot off the other, and it was pretty central. I don't even remember, but good segue from you. I still think he's looking for home within his team. I still get that feeling. He's a wonderful player. The opportunities he gets, for the most part, I think he's doing well. But the position that he's playing, I'm not 100% sure that he feels all that comfortable there. As I've said, when Kevin De Bruyne, who can play anywhere, comes in, he wants to come in those places. We all know the relationship that Kevin De Bruyne has with Erling Haaland. That's important. Probably, if you look at Alvarez, he's going to say, well, I wish that I was on the end of those crosses and those balls. I still think he's a number 9, and he's in a fight that he's not going to win. So he can be great. It looks to me like Pep Guardiola is investing in him, is trying to find him that spot in behind, but I don't think it's a perfect situation for him. It kind of, I don't know if it's a good comparison, but it reminds me a little bit of Gabriel Jesus, who never really, right? He was played on the right. Alvarez has played there in the past. You could sense it almost that he was in a position to win the fight with Kun Aguero, but then Kun Aguero showed himself and just said, no, None of that. Pep Guardiola valued Gabriel Jesus for his defensive abilities, but in the end, Kun Aguero said, "Look, I'm scoring goals every game. I need to play. And he play." It's a similar situation with Alvarez now, because I think you feel that Haaland's just going to be scoring goals consistently, and eventually there may not be a place for Alvarez. So I can understand those rumors.
I remember asking him that question, where's his preferred place to play? And just last month when we had an interview, and he gave me a diplomatic answer saying that he's just trying to be a versatile player and he'll happily play wherever the gaffer puts him. But Julian, it's okay. We're on to you. We've got your back wherever you go. Anyways, we're going to end things right there. Thank you so much, of course, to James Ollie, who joined us live from Stamford Bridge. Janusz, as always, my ride or die. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.